do you still play around with fasting? Like, do you still mess around with it, or is it not much of a priority for you?
It's not really a priority for me, but I do end up having a little bit of a quote fasting window every day, but it's much less than most people would be impressed by. It's 4:30 here in Costa Rica right now. And when we get off the phone, I'm going to eat dinner. So I'll probably finish dinner by 5:30. And then my first amount of food in the morning will probably be around 6 a.m. So tonight I'm only going to get 12 and a half hours. But some days it's 13 hours. A lot of days I like to eat early and even finish eating by 5. And then usually my first food is 6 or 6:30 before I go surf. So I would say 12 to 13 hours is my quote unquote fasting window. I think most people wouldn't even consider that a fasting window. But what I think about for myself is optimizing sleep. And so I don't want to eat within 3 hours of going to sleep. Here in Costa Rica, I'm at the equator. So it's always about 12 hours of light and 12 hours of dark. So it gets dark around 6 o'clock every single day of the whole year. So I go to sleep early. I get up early because the sun also comes up at 5:30 every single day. And it's time to go surf. So when it's awake, when the sun comes up, I get up, which means I go to sleep early, which means my dinner is eaten earlier in the evening. So that's about it. And I don't, I don't worry about it a whole lot anymore. Yeah. I think I have other things that are stressors.
Yeah, totally get that. Yeah. And it's like when you look at, even when I'm not fasting, I try to abide by somewhat of an ETRF, where it's like, I'm like, if I'm going to fast at this point, I still mess around. I always shift my fasting windows around. So I'm experiencing the quote unquote benefits of a fast at different times of the day whenever I fast, right? There's no structured fasting eating window for me anymore. It's, you know what? I'm not hungry. I'm going to go for 18 hours. Screw it. Whatever. Okay. That means I'm breaking my fast at 4 p.m. That means I'm breaking my fast at 11 a.m. It doesn't matter. Who cares? Does it? But it's interesting. I mean, because either way, I still abide by, and there's one of my favorite studies of all time, and I reference it a lot, is a BMC medical genomics study talking about the fact that as far as what is expressed and as far as insulin sensitivity in the fat versus the muscle, you can get away with eating more in the morning than you can in the evening, generally speaking. Now, that's going to vary depending on different phenotypes and different people and how they exercise and how they move. So I try to get 50% or so of my calories earlier in the day. And then I taper as the day goes on, usually eat a lighter dinner. And that's just how I sleep better. And that's just what seems to function for me. It may or may not be the right or wrong way, but it's I'm seeing a lot of the evidence at least with fasting, pointing towards ETRF as being marginally better than, say, just skipping breakfast. And it probably has to do with the fact that people that are willing to do ETRF are more cognitively aware and using fasting as a tool versus people that maybe do intermittent fasting and just skip breakfast. They do it because it's easy to do. And they're not necessarily, they're just abiding by it, right? Whereas someone that's consciously, it takes effort to skip dinner. It doesn't take that much effort to skip breakfast. Let's be real. And it's, so at least that's my take on it, right?
No, I think that, I think you have to really protect your sleep. And if your fasting practice is impinging on your sleep by causing you to go, I'm eating from noon to 8, then you go to sleep at 10, or you try to go sleep at 9. Eating at 8 o'clock is pretty late for most people. I guess if you eat at 8 o'clock and then you're going to sleep at 11 o'clock at night, maybe I guess you get 3 hours before you go to sleep then, but still
but even then, man, you're looking at, PER1 and BMAL1 and all these things that you're messing up by eating. And again, people will poke holes and get pissed off at me about this, but I don't think that eating consistently after the sun goes down is a very good thing.
I would agree with you. It makes sense. It makes sense to me too. And I think that's the way to do it. Again, I don't want to over fast for myself. Like, I'm in a phase of my life where I'm trying to maximize testosterone and maximize athletic performance for surfing. And, I would love to have more debates with the longevity community. And, I'm not really convinced that this promise of incredible longevity will come from caloric restriction or limitation of protein or I must intermittent fast every day. I just don't think that that's necessary for us as humans. I haven't seen anything that's really convincing for it, but I do know that my inflammation is extremely low. I just did a blood work review on my podcast. My HSCRP was 0.5. My fasting insulin is really low. My IGF-1 is 1/2 of a standard deviation below the mean. So my fasting IGF-1 is probably lower than David Sinclair's. IGF-1. And I know that I feel good every day when I go surf, and I have good muscle mass and good libido and good sleep. And I'm like, I know those things are metrics that I can lean on today. I'm just going to keep doing that. I'm not going to sacrifice my quality of life right now for some empty promise of longevity long-term. That doesn't make any sense to me. And I don't think it's actually even true.
Well, and the fear, the concern that I have with fasting, and this is coming from someone that, okay, I enjoy fasting, and I always explain to people that, you can rain on my parade as much as you want. I enjoy it, and I continue to do it because I enjoy it, not because I'm seeking one specific thing. And but the moment that I notice that my cortisol is out of whack or my sleep is gone, I take a break. And you have to keep a wolf at the door for that. And that's just the way that it goes. And when it comes down to even the longevity equations, like we're talking just about that, you are also a very active person, and that's a whole separate discussion, right? Like that's an uncomfortable conversation to have with people, is that they need to be active, and that the more active you are. And even if we did want to back up and have a very basic AMPK discussion, with the bulk of the nutrition community, at the end of the day, yes, being active. If you put yourself in a deficit nutritionally, you put yourself in a deficit by being active, good on you for both, whatever. Okay. But being active, the fear, though, I go back to the fear or concern that I have with fasting, is that it implies that we can do all this stuff by restricting what we eat. And it almost gives people a license to not move as much. And that's what I want to be very careful of. And I've received lots of hate because I fast and I still move. Yeah. I still move like an animal, right? Like I'll fast for 16 hours and then I'll go deadlift 465. Like what's the problem with that? I still think that movement is critical, and I try to put things up, and it doesn't mean that everyone should go do that. I don't want everyone to go deadlift. I'm not trying to toot my own horn. My point is that I really think that being active is very important, whether you are fasting or not. And if fasting becomes your license to say, oh, I'm going to restrict my calories so much by doing this fast and I'm not going to move, I mean, then the body has no choice but to start catabolizing, because if you don't use it, you lose it. It's that simple. So at least that's my take on it, right? It is what it is.
Lean muscle mass is pretty important, and a lot of the people in the longevity community that would say you need to do extreme amounts of intermittent fasting or protein limitation don't have a lot of lean muscle mass. So it's like, what are you doing with it? I don't understand it. It's clearly being catabolized. And some of them have even been frank about the fact that their hormones are not great. It's like, why would we listen to this?
Yeah,
it doesn't make any sense to me. I'm sure they're very well intentioned.
I've opened a few videos with this because I'm like, people need to understand this. Like, fasting is like Spider-Man. With great power comes great responsibility. If you're going to do this, you also need to be making sure you're meeting your protein requirements. You need to make sure this stuff, because yes, fasting has benefits, certainly, but you also need to eat. So it's, and you need to be paying attention to that.
Yeah. I think you could say the same thing about keto, that's how I feel about keto too.
True,
it's like,
absolutely,
be responsible. Like, know that you're not, leading just, like blindly, just doing something because, and ignoring potentially negative effects as it continues long-term. Yeah.